So actually, what I thought is instead of doing New Year's resolutions, why don't I break it down? Because you always fail. So why don't I break it down into this idea of New Day resolutions?
Let me introduce you right now to my friend Rich Mulholland. He has a company where he helps speakers develop talks, like CEOs and people who need to give presentations and want to have a next level, kick-ass presentation. They'll go to him and they'll do everything from the slide decks and train them to do all of those things. But he's a global speaker himself in over 30 countries. He's an entrepreneur. He's actually opened up various companies. I've also, he's a fellow member of Entrepreneur Organization. I don't know if any of you are familiar with EO. Without any further ado, I want to go into our next segment. Of course, we're saying here, if the aim is to have habits, how do we create them? What comes before actually having that habit? Here we go.
So there was two parts to this. So there's an organization you may have heard of called Sleek Geek. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. Run by
My brother was actually in that community many years ago. So I know the name through that.
Right. So I knew of the community, and I knew Ilan from before when he was a business guy. I followed his journey, and his journey kind of echoed, it was a few years ahead of mine. He was out of shape. He wanted to do something. And he'd signed up and he'd become a precision nutrition coach. And he coached me and I got daily lessons for a year, literally a lesson a day for a year. And every single week I was given micro things to do. So this week, they don't care. They said you were never putting on a diet the whole time. This week, your only rule is put your knife and fork down between every bite. And I literally made a placemat that I wrote the rule on a piece of paper. So I put it over the plate. And then everyone, the jazz and the kids would tease me if I didn't make it, you didn't put your knife and fork down. And so basically you do that. And then there's something else, chew your food this many times. And then it's try do this. Then only once you've got you some better ways of thinking about your food, you start going in. So I realized this programmatic approach, this is their way of hitting that part of the tennis ball, right? Of hitting that part of the racket. So they take the hard bit that you thought you were struggling with, that you had to focus. And they say, don't worry about that. We'll get there way later. And then I read Michael Pollan's book, Food Rules. And then my mind exploded. Have you ever read it?
No.
Oh, it's just brilliant. He wrote the biggest tome on eating, but he basically realized people don't need the knowledge. People actually don't want knowledge. He said, if people trust you, that you've done the rigor and the work for the knowledge, they're actually okay just being told what to do. So he broke it down into these tiny little algorithms that will help you have better rules in your head around eating. And so I would work through those daily. And then I lost 20 kilograms that year. I was in better shape than I'd been in for ages. And I felt younger, healthier, and better all around. And I didn't diet at all. I still had chocolates every week. I still had pizza. I loved everything I was still having. And so I realized that there's something to this. And what I wanted to do is to say, well, how can I use the thinking that got me here into every aspect of my life? And that was the departure point.
How did that lead from that experience into this methodology that you have, which I personally think we should be applying to everything, whether it be eating or learning or any kind of self-care, self-growth, business growth. I think businesses also grow in the same kind of way.
So what happened that year as well was, and that was a big year for me, is I realized that they were giving me these goals, but I had also micro goals that I wanted to work through. And I knew my New Year's resolution was to lose weight. But my understanding was New Year's resolution is only payable on the 31st of December that year. So actually what I thought is, instead of doing New Year's resolutions, why don't I break it down? Because you always fail. So why don't I break it down into this idea of New Day resolutions? So the idea was, I'm going to give myself a micro goal every day. One day it might be I've got a liter bottle, drink 3 canisters of water for today. So that was one thing. One might do now an everyday goal is I do 21 pull-ups and 50 squats throughout my workday and things like that. So I gave myself these micro goals. And the idea was that every night I would layer those with the Sleek Geek goals. So I would start tracking my score because I love games. I wanted to gamify this year, but by my own rules. So at the end of the first week, though, there was some days where I missed it. And I thought, well, that shouldn't matter so much. So I decided to create a scoring system, and I've refined it, over the course of a few months. But where it basically landed up was, I'm going to give myself a goal every single day. If I can make 5 goals in a week, then my week was a win. My first marker was to make failing part of the process. But actually, what started happening is there's certain days now where I'll be like, you know what? I actually want to take today as an off day. I'm willing to reward myself breaking the chain today to allow myself to go have a chocolate bar. But because it was a factored in, and failure is a typical bad term, but because it was a factored in failure that was part of the game, it's like having a card in your hand that changes the rules of a card game you're playing. It's still in the rules of the game, so it's still okay. So then what would happen, I'd say, okay, cool. And if I can get 3 weeks of, wins in a month, then my month is a win. And if I could have 11 months in a year, then my year is a win. And so I started creating these micro streaks to say, hey, I've got to get 5 days and get a streak. And so I would start logging those things. And I had day streaks, week streaks, month streaks, and now I'm on a 3-year streak of doing this. And what that means is that every day at the end of it, I get this little dopamine hit when my streak counter goes up. I am giving myself lots of rewards, and every single day is 4 or 5 instances of victory for me. And the end result is that something I'm working towards a year from now will happen because I'm doing small things.
What I really appreciate about the way that you're teaching this, and I guess the method, how it's evolved, is that you've built in room for failure. And I think that that's really important. As part of, with my programs, when people are members in my paid programs, I have daily, what I call MTEs, mentality training exercises, which are kind of like mindfulness meditations meets neuroscience and other explanations. And they're all created in a way, packaged in a way to be mutually reinforcing with influence teachings that I teach people. So, for example, the outer game of leadership and then the inner game of leadership. And to develop the inner game, it's not about listening to a talk and saying, oh, I should think this way. It's actually about daily having those streaks of doing these MTEs, exploring how your mind works, observing it, and so that when you're in the moment, you've had your streak has been long enough that suddenly when you're in the moment, you then suddenly realize that you're acting different, you're feeling different, everything then comes out. You start influencing people from the inside out. And there's one of my favorite quotes from Henry David Thoreau. Do you know the one, as a man walks in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live a life that he has imagined, he will meet success unexpected in common hours. And I think that really speaks to what it is that you're talking about here, which is just doing the daily micro things, goals. And then one day you look back and it's like, wow, I've actually met success in common hours. Success is not an event. It's really the process that's led to it.
The one thing is, though, I think that actually tracking the days is what the secret sauce is. So by just saying do something daily, if I get to day 20 and I skip it, I can skip a day and I can start again, or it could be bad or it could be not. But if I've actually counted the number, and I know this is that Jerry Seinfeld, he talks about don't break the chain. Somebody asked him how he could be so funny consistently. He says, well, every single day I write a joke. And when I've written the joke for the day, I put a big red cross on my calendar. And I've done that every day for like 20 years. And he said, the only way to continue being funny is I just make sure that I never break the chain. And maybe it's every work day, maybe he takes weekends off. Seth Godin writes a blog post every day. Beeple, the artist, created 5,000 days of artworks every single day. Now, when you start counting the days, when you put a number to it, when you're on day 2,975, not doing 2,976 is almost impossible. And then the second hack I have for everybody is, and this came from Precision Nutrition. One of the best tips they gave me on that program through Sleek Geek was, it said, cool, you can quit anytime you want. There's only one rule we ask you of this program, and you have to agree on this up front. Any day you want to quit, the only rule is you're never allowed to quit that day. You always have to quit the next day. So you can throw in the towel today, but you still got to finish today, and then tomorrow morning you don't have to do it. Because it's amazing. We always want to start something, on Monday, but we always want to quit it today. And they always said, cool, so you want to break the chain? No problem. Just do it today though, and then quit tomorrow. And I think if we start having that only quit tomorrow rule, it becomes easy. And of course, tomorrow you wake up and you're like, what was I thinking? And then you carry on going.
Okay, what did you guys think? There's quite a lot to resonate with, right? Absolutely. Now, I know that there's quite a lot that he said, and so I'm going to do a super, super quick run through of some of the key points. Never underestimate the power of effort over time. Neuroplasticity obviously takes time as well, and obviously that's also what habit forming relies on. Number 2, to grow, we need to be intentional about what we do daily. If you want to change your life, you basically need to change something that you do every single day. Number 3 is we need to create micro steps that move you in the direction of your goal. Number 4 is we need to actually track them as streaks and allow room for either failure or reward. And this was something that he really, really emphasized, that it's one thing to say I'm going to be doing this daily, but it's only when we actually count the numbers of days that we're doing it and we create those streaks that actually makes it more difficult to then quit, because we don't want to actually spoil that streak. And then number 5 is the streak scorecard has tangible value. This just really speaks to point number 4, because it becomes more unlikely that you'll break the streak that you're tracking and scoring. And of course, his great tip at the end is you can quit whenever you want, just not today. Wait to quit tomorrow. I thought that was a really sound piece of advice as well. So I would just recommend, firstly, non-attachment to outcomes. But yes, let's be fully engaged in bringing our best self. Let's track our daily streaks. And so long as you're doing something every day, and you have to be marking it off. Don't just say, oh, I'm doing this daily. You actually have to be tracking it physically, because that's what creates the power in it. You will figure the rest out. And of course, that coupled with everything else that we're doing with high performance mentality to bring have our best mindset, in every single moment, that can help us to bring our best A game.